Hi, welcome to Laura's View and Tarot 2. I am so glad you're here. Today's date is Friday, April 18th, 2025. We're going to take a little bit of a rabbit trail in our conversation today, even if we end up with rather an ordinary, everyday question for the tarot, as I think we will, as I'm planning this segment with you. I want to talk a little bit about EGI, or elite gender inversion. I am not an expert. I do think it is something that is not speculative, but is practiced. And I have taken the time to learn some of the markers for skeletal structure, because my understanding is when there is an elite gender inversion, there is an infusion of the opposite gender's hormones starting at 8 weeks of pregnancy through birth. And that changes the outward gender for the baby that's born. the I've done a little research to see, well, what happens after? Are they lifelong dependent on um, hormone therapy? Does it change their chromosomal structure? What I'm finding is most likely their chromosomes still remain the same. Now, why is that important? Because one of the things before I factored in elite gender inversions into this whole debate about having trans girls be in girls' sports, was I said, why don't they just participate according to their chromosomes? Well, I don't think we're ready to have that whole rabbit hole exposed to the public. I think that would have a lot of pushback so I think that's why we're seeing and hearing more people say, hey, their birth assigned gender is what they should participate by. Okay, fine. And then we get into the fact that Title IX was originally invoked to protect the rights of the female sex in sports participation to end discrimination. Now, here's another fact that can't be argued. Currently, as far as we in the general population are aware and know, there is no way to change your sex. You can change your body's expression of gender. You can allow yourself to be altered physically to more closely resemble a gender you prefer or feel that you identify with, but you can't truly, at a cellular level, change your sex. So there's going to be some court cases, and it depends on, I guess, which judge they get in front of, or what group of judges they get in front of, how this will be interpreted. But if Title IX was written to protect the female sex, not the female gender, it seems to me that the interpretation of that law should be pretty easily defined and understood. Now, I'm a refugee. I'm a transplant to Maine, and I am no fan of the governor here, Governor Mills. By the way, since I do know a little bit about skeletal structure, it's interesting to note that the governor of Maine has a male skeletal structure, and you can do a little homework and confirm that yourself. It's one of the reasons I chose the thumbnail that's on this video. And so that may have some impact on why this is a hill she is willing to die on. Because Maine has told President Trump, or Governor Mills did, I don't think she speaks for very much of Maine, but that she would see them in court. And she is willing to jeopardize federal funding to all schools in the state on behalf of her position here, and apparently less than a handful of athletes who have expressed a different gender preference and want to participate in female sports. So Pam Bondi this week initiated some legal proceedings against the state of Maine, and they're going to court as Governor Mills asked for. And I wondered, Mill's tone towards Trump was rather antagonistic. Is Mill's tone going to be her millstone? And that's where I'm going with this question. I would just like to find out, kind of get some insights from the universe about what's going to happen with these legal proceedings and the differing interpretations of Title IX for athletes. The Governor Mills is going to be using an argument that it should be a states' right question, the extent and breadth and scope of the interpretation of that law. Um, I don't know that I agree with that. I think when some things start at the federal level, at the state, they have to still conform with the federal interpretations and guidelines. So if the that right had been referred to the states, she would be absolutely correct. But it hasn't been conferred to the states, individual states, to interpret and to design according to their wishes, as was done with abortion, which is now kind of each state decides their policies on that. So, wonder where this is going. I thought the universe might have some insights, and let's find out what's going on with Governor Mills, who has a male skeleton, and this hill that she is willing to die on of taking on the whole federal government to and willing to give up funding for schools for every student in the state on this particular issue. Sure doesn't seem like the right kind of policy you want to be invoking for reelection, but hey, most of our elections are anything but, right? That's another rabbit hole I'm not going into today. Okay, let's ask this question of the universe and find out what the answers are together. Again, we're just going to ask for some insights and information. What's going on with this lawsuit between Maine and the United States government, and we will find out together. Okay, I'm going to switch the camera. Okay, so again, just for clarity, we would like um, insights and information about this lawsuit that is going on between the federal government, the Department of Justice in particular, and the state of Maine. Governor Mills' stance that um, interpretation of Title IX should be a state right, and the federal government's stance that Title IX was designed to protect the female sex and not the female gender. What's going on? Okay, we got the King of Cups, Ace of Wands. There was no yes or no element to this question, so that won't be a yes, just so you know. We have the Four of Swords, more cups with the Queen of Cups, the Fool, Eight of Cups, and Seven of Pentacles. Let's talk about the cards here, what they're telling us. First of all, the situation is being indicated with the King of Cups. Now, the King of Cups, Mr. Pokerface, he's known to he'll say what he wants to get what he wants, and what a perfect card to represent some politicians, right? Now, there is a potential for some new beginnings as a result of this lawfare that's going on, these lawsuits that are being levied against the state of Maine and vice versa. And so it's going to kind of herald some new beginnings. Now, here's where I think it gets a little interesting, at least with what's being expressed so far. The recent past card is the Four of Swords. Just talking about there's some information that has not yet made it to mainstream, and that may be the the subject I gently or tried to gently broach earlier in this about EGI. So those that have had been altered in utero. And that may be what's not ready to be brought to the public. It may be what fuels resistance to having assigned chromosomes, be what determines what sport category you're in, male or female. So there's some information that's just not ready to come out. It's an emotional subject, okay, for those involved on either side, unless they're willing to find some common middle ground. And so it's an emotional subject, and that's going to continue. That's currently what's going on here, saying, there's emotions involved here, but it's time to kind of use your emotional intelligence. Now, to me, it doesn't make sense to jeopardize hundreds of thousands of children and their education for a stance you're taking or a hill, like I said, a hill you're willing to die on. It doesn't make sense, and so it's kind of an emotional topic. Let's look at the near future. That's where we want some information. First of all, the Fool shows up. So it talks about stepping out in a new way. So things are going to change. They are going to have to change. And since this is indicative of change and it's change that they're resisting, it looks to me like it's saying it's going to happen regardless. Okay. Now, it looks like Governor Mills is going to be going off, taking her marbles, and taking a little time out after her moment in the sun. I have a feeling she is being well compensated as a deep state player to be the face and voice of this topic and this lawsuit. Um, but yeah, it looks like it's gonna happen. They're going to have to comply. That eventually the compliance is going to be, hey, you have to change. You have to change. Let's see. We're going to get four more cards and see what the universe continues to want us to know. We've got the Six of Pentacles. We have the Lovers, the Empress, and the High Priestess. I thought she'd show up because she often shows up when there is confusion or expression of someone's gender that doesn't align with their assignment at birth. I thought actually it would show up here to indicate Mills, actually, but it didn't. It did show up here. So again, the topic does involve the rights of. Now, please understand, I do not advocate for someone who is a trans male or trans female having any kind of restrictions on their civil liberties. I'm just seeing that it does create an unfair playing field that people struggled for decades to change when they're allowed to participate in a sport that their body hasn't been constrained by the gender expression from inception. So I think it's a valid point because we've seen that mediocre male athletes all of a sudden decide they're female, or at least for a season they do, and they get these awards and just totally, and sometimes injure their opponents because they're just biologically still created like the gender that they've had since they were born. The we've got the Six of Pentacles. Again, I said I think she's getting well compensated here. I do see that there's going to be something. I believe the Trump administration does have a heart, and I think there's going to be, in the interim till we get here, there's going to be some funding that still happens for Maine schools uh, to avoid all children suffering for the actions of one or two, but there will be some meagerness to what is given to them, not what they're used to. Okay, the Lover's card shows up here, talking about needs and wants, was what made me say, hey, I think that there's going to be some provisions made to still keep some things funded in the Maine school system, unless the shenanigans of the governor or the governor's office preclude that. For example, they may still want to fund the school lunch program, which is sometimes the only access kids have to consistent meals. And they may want to do that. But if the funds were to get diverted into sports or something like that, then even that could curtail the generosity that they may be willing to offer until things get settled. Then the final card, we have the Empress and the High Priestess. I already talked about the High Priestess. The Empress card often shows up as a card of new ideas. Okay, it's about beginnings, and it's not just about cellular ones, it's about sometimes beginnings of ideas. So, this may be the topic that again starts more of that conversation about, hey, there's another type of sex change that we need to know about that is much more prevalent than we might have wanted or known to about. And to me, I think there's going to be a lot of genuine and justified anger on the part of people who are having to have themselves be physically mutilated to align with whatever gender they want to express, finding out that for some, now it was done without their consent because they were in utero. But talk about, that it was painless. There has to be, I don't know, some way that we resolve all this that's very humane for people. And I think part of it would be to stop whatever environmental or societal impacts are causing a lot of that confusion, or injections that are causing that confusion. Okay, have to speak carefully. You know what I'm saying, folks. Let's recap. We talked a little bit before we got into our read about the state of Maine and the lawsuit and legal proceedings that are going on with the governor here and the Department of Justice. We talked a little bit about elite gender inversion and what that might be. Encourage people that if it's a rabbit hole you haven't gone down, you might want to. I didn't earlier, but I want to say now also, please, there is any number of people on the planet that don't judge someone's gender expression by one or two elements. For example, there are lots of biological females that don't have the digit ratio that you understand happens with elite gender inversion. There are people who don't have the ear positioning that is kind of, or the skeletal shape or the neck, the collarbones, the things that we can look at and go, male, 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 male. Okay, I don't care. It's male. That's a male body going on. Make sure before you make a decision that someone might have an assigned at conception gender that's different than what's being expressed. Make sure you get several markers before you make that determination. But it's a lot more prevalent than you think. And so I'm not by no means an expert, but I do have this little cheat sheet by my desk. So for photo comparisons, and there's male skeletal overlays you can put on top of facial structure. But again, people that have done that have said you have to be very careful because you can make it seem to be what you want it to be in some cases. So placement is crucial. There's midwives that talk about where the ears are, that's indicative of gender. But again, it's not a hard and fast rule. So if you can look at mine, because I with my short hair, it's pretty obvious here. We've got the ears going here, and if you come forward, they kind of come to the center of the eye here. In man, the top of the ear is going to come with the top of the brow arch. Often with men, the brow arch is much deeper too. Not always, but again, you'd be looking for multiple markers before you make that determination. Quite often you can find them. And I will reiterate, because this is not the first video that I've talked about elite gender inversion, but I did more so in this one. Please have a heart for those that may be EGI, even the governor of Maine. Because at the end of the day, if that was done to them, they had no say in it. It happened to them before they were born unwillingly. Now, what they're responsible for now is what they do with their life moving forward. And that is regardless of what gender they express, that they embrace, or that they were intended to have at birth, period. So judge them by their actions, okay? You can do a little judging of the parents by doing that to a helpless infant, but not those that have had that happen to them. That happened without their consent, plain and simple. Okay, so to the cards. We said we wanted some insights about this lawfare that's going on. Well, I shouldn't say lawfare, but these legal proceedings that are happening between the DOJ and the state of Maine. And what we got was some information that, first of all, there's going to be some changes happen as a result of this. And we were asking about change and the fact that the cards indicated that there's some information that is not yet out there, and it may be what I was talking about just in the monologue part of this video. The EGI thing may end up being an element of discussion on the matter of Title IX, girls sports, boys sports, etc. But it does look like near future said there's going to be some changes going on. They're going to have to adapt to some change. And since they're resisting change, and it said changes happen, that's telling me, hey, it's not going to work out quite like they wanted. Now, I did get some indication that the federal government is going to have a heart for the children of Maine, and attempt to not cut off all funding. Again, it would be contingent probably on how that gets directed. An example I used was school lunch programs. Maybe the federal government would still want to fund those in the interim, even though there's some impact going on in general funding. And if funds were given for that purpose and diverted, that might even dry that up. But it does look like they will attempt to keep innocent little ones in Maine from being impacted by this whole topic and the drama and everything that's going on. And then the final card just said, this is a card that often shows up. Now, it shows up for a number of reasons, but it does show up really often when there's talk about trans issues, trans folk, etc. So it's kind of interesting. I was not surprised to see it show up in this read at all. It was the final card saying that, hey, this isn't the big topic of the day. That's not really, but it does look like there's going to be more discussion. So it's Friday. It's Good Friday if you're of the Christian faith, and I wish you the happiest of holidays. If you're not, I have some homework for you, and that is, again, start doing a little research into this whole topic of EGI and identifying skeletal structures. It'll be very interesting. You're going to see a vast majority of people that are in the spotlight of the world that have markers that would indicate that, which takes us down another rabbit hole and another one and another one. So start doing your homework. And it's an interesting topic, I think, to explore. You can hold off on believing it. Just do your exploration and start looking into it and see what you think, okay? In the meantime, that's it for this video. I thank you so much for listening to me as I go down a few rabbit trails. And it does look like the state of Maine, the stance they're taking is going to have to, they're going to have to change. They're going to have to. And the federal government will try to make that change happen as gently as possible, impacting the children of the state as little as possible. But that's kind of all up to the governor. Okay. And again, that governor's got a skeletal structure that may have an impact on why she's adamant on this topic. Until next time, if you're willing to receive it, I send you love, light, and I wish for you everything bright. Bye.